Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LI Cadre. Miss Brenda Combs today is going to present on the Transition Attainment Record, which is known as the TAR.
Okay, as Stephanie said earlier, we are going to talk about the TAR, the Transition Attainment Record is what that stands for, if there's anyone on here that's new. And what the TAR is that it is a checklist, and it evaluates the student's readiness in reading and math, science, and social studies. And there are two components of your alternate Kentucky summative assessments, and that is your attainment task and your TAR, your Transition Attainment Record. Both of those components play a vital role in the student's assessment. And also these assessments, they meet the federal guidelines for the ESSA and the IDEIA. Okay, we have goals for the TAR, and they are to provide an accurate picture of the student's achievement, and ratings must reflect the student's current achievement levels. This means the rater must be confident that the ratings being assessed accurately reflect the student's achievement when the TAR is finalized. As you noticed, I said a few words a little bit differently, and those are really words that we need to focus on as we're doing the TAR. The items being rated must have been observed within a year's time, and any items that have not been assessed within a year must be assessed prior to completion of the TAR to confirm the student's performance level. Okay, the approach, we have assess students demonstrates that evidence performance of desired skill sets and concepts. It allows the instructional team to evaluate student performance, and it permits students with significant cognitive disabilities to be assessed on skills and concepts that are linked to grade level academic standards through basic literacy, language, quantitative math, and science skills that will lead to successful transitions from the high school to adult life. Now, there are several steps in completing the TAR. The first one is complete the online training and do the quiz. Only one certified person on the team has to do the quiz or take the training and do the quiz. So only one person has to do that. Review all the standards, critical functions, items, and possible documentation, locations for each item in each content area. And we will talk about different locations toward the end. Before rating a student's performance, you need to review the TAR items with other professionals who participate in the implementation of the student's instruction. And then the fourth one is complete the student interview. And the best time to do that interview is when you have the time one-on-one. And if the student can't do the interview, even with the supports, the team may have to complete it, based on their knowledge of the student. The fifth step is the team jointly decides whether the student's performance on each item should be rated as a 0, 1, or 2. The sixth step is make sure to respond to every item and record where the documentation for that item is located. That's such as your student working folder, their ILP, etc. If unsure of the student's current performance level for an item, develop an assessment activity during which the student's performance can be observed. Number 8, review the completed TAR to ensure that all areas have been marked. The last one is to transfer those scores to the student registration database. It's mainly referred as the SRD, as indicated when directions are received through the alternate assessment email distribution list and ARC email.
Brenda,
yes.
Is that 0, 1, and 2? Is that actually 0 meaning they don't do it at all, and 2 being that they do it all the time?
2, they do it independently, and 0, they are doing it maybe with hand over hand, physical prompts, those types of things. And we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have to have supporting documentation. So rating this of student performance must be based on direct observation and must be documented. The lead team member should check off the location of the documentation. If the location is not listed, then you need to check other and write in the location. So the form, you'll see what it says right here. This is exactly how they have it. ILP, which is a current ILP, or the most current transition planning documents. Student working folder, which could be the due process or the classroom working folder. And then other, if that's not listed in those two, then write that in, what you're using, and then no previous documentation. Now, designing and utilizing assessment activities. So when unsure of the student's current performance on an item, the team should create an assessment activity to allow demonstration of that performance. And then, as needed, consult with the content teacher to align the activity to the TAR concepts and skills. So remember, we're always as a team doing something. Select an activity that reflects the critical function of the concept or skill set to which the item is related. Okay, so the guidelines for observing a student during an assessment activity, that is our main, I guess the main piece that we always do is we're observing those students to make sure if they're doing that properly or how they are doing it or if they're getting it. So provide assessment directions. We try to make clear directions to our students. Provide the student with tools necessary to demonstrate the knowledge, the skill, or concept as indicated on the assessment item. Observe the student at a different time in the session if the session is interrupted with a medical or behavior issue. You know, those things come up. Sometimes we have to do what we have to do. Use support such as your assistive technology, adaptations, and modifications as needed. Provide a minimum of 3 choices when choices are provided, and include distractors or incorrect answers along with the correct choice. Score any items completed with prompts. That means they could be verbal cues, models, partial physical guidance, etc. So we mark that as a 1 because they're developing in that, and it's also supported. And then full physical prompting, leading the student to an answer would result in a score of 0. So that is if a student doesn't really know, so we're actually doing hand over hand or something that we are doing for the child. So I put an example in here, and it's really about Eastern Kentucky. So it says the student is able to identify the author's purpose in a text. This is what we want the child to do, the activity. In order to assess whether the student is able to identify the author's purpose, the teacher develops an activity around a newspaper article about flood damage in his town. The student is to read the article from the paper and look at the photos. The student is given the article, which has been modified, reduced, and adapted with picture symbols to read. Given 3 picture options, the student selects the picture that best represents the author's purpose for writing the article. So we're going to rate this. So they get a 0 if the student was not able to respond, even with the verbal and or partial prompts, physical prompts or hand over hand. A score of a 1 if the student selected the author's purpose with verbal prompts. And then a 2 if the student selects the author's purpose independently. Then the team rates or scores the student's performance as the TAR is completed. The lead team member reports the student score to KDE through the student registration database. And then we have to make sure that we have this done by May the 31st of 2024 because it closes on that day. Okay, so here what we have, the part 1 of the TAR. In case you haven't got to watch that webinar, this is that part. It's about 12 minutes, 11 minutes and something. So about 12 minutes long. So we're going to watch that, and you can take notes or however you want to do that, because this is a part of it that you can look, and then you have to take a quiz. So we'll go ahead and start that.
Hello, and welcome to the Transition Attainment Record, or
You too,
TAR,
Brenda.
training for the 2023-2024 school year. My name is Krista Mullins from the Office of Assessment and Accountability. The Kentucky Department of Education and OAA will be your guide through this training. Please note that once you review this training, there is an administration guide linked on the next slide, as well as a corresponding quiz in the online training system, which must be reviewed and completed prior to administering the TAR. Our agenda for the training can be seen here. On this slide, you will find a link to the Transition Attainment Record, or TAR, administration guide. Please open or download the administration guide for today's training. It is also found on the Kentucky Alternate Assessment Resources page. Many quiz questions will come from the administration guide, so it is critical to have access to it. Let's look at the standards assessed. Beginning in the 2023-2024 school year, the phase-out of the former Kentucky assessment standards for the TAR is complete. There is one version of the TAR written to the current Kentucky academic standards and alternate assessment targets. Let's take a closer look at the Transition Attainment Record. The TAR is a rating scale or checklist where the Admissions and Release Committee or Individual Education Program IEP team observes the student, takes a body of student work, and assesses specific content using the checklist. The student interview is used to help guide transition planning. This rating will be used to represent the academic portion of post-secondary readiness at the high school level. The TAR is required to be administered at grade 11. The purpose is for it to be administered in place of the ACT for students on Kentucky's alternate assessment. Just like the ACT, the TAR assesses students in ELA, math, and science. The items on the TAR are linked to grade level content standards. Beginning this year, the benchmarks for the TAR are a 16 in reading, 13 in mathematics, and 16 in science at all grade levels. If a student does not meet benchmark in any content area, mathematics, ELA, or science at grade 11, that student can retake that content area at grade 12 or 14. The benchmarks are the same at all grade levels. For a student in grade 14 to participate in the TAR administration, they cannot have a graduation code applied. Any student who participates in the TAR at grade 12 or 14 must first be registered in the Student Registration Database, or SRD, by the DAC, DOS, or someone with district-level access. The DAC, DOS, or district-level administrator should contact DAC Info at dacinfo@education.ky.gov and ask to have the grade 12 or 14 TAR opened for score entry in the SRD. This security is vital and extremely important. Please take note that while the TAR is not a standard multiple choice assessment, it is still a state assessment and as a result is considered secure testing material. It is okay to know the concepts and teach the concepts that are in the TAR. However, it is never okay to reproduce the TAR for use inside the classroom, to share test items with anyone not involved in the administration of the TAR, or to use specific test items from the TAR with students during instruction. The TAR administration training opens on Monday, October 2nd and closes on March 25th, 2024. The TAR administration window opens on Monday, October 2nd and will remain open until May 24th, 2024. This training and the quiz must be completed before administering the TAR, and all scores need to be submitted no later than May 31st, 2024. This is a firm deadline. To access the TAR, you will need to log into the online training system, or OTS, and go to the Transition Attainment Records tab under Teacher Tools. Now we will transition into what administering the TAR will look like. The TAR administration is conducted by the student's instructional team, which includes personnel familiar with the student and the student's work. The team may include the student's special education teacher, general education teachers from collaborative classrooms, related service providers, and paraprofessionals. Paraprofessionals can provide information, but may not score the TAR assessment. One certified lead team member will be responsible for entering the scores in the SRD. However, because the TAR is a state assessment, all team members participating must complete the administration code training and the inclusion of special populations training. The lead team member must complete the online training for the TAR in the OTS and must pass the quiz with a score of 80% or higher. Together, the team should review all the content standards assessed and the sources of documentation of the student's work. The scoring of the TAR is done by the ARC or team associated with the student. The team should work together to determine scores on each item. KDE and UK have provided guidance in the TAR Administration Guide on how to reach consensus. When team members cannot reach consensus on a rating, the lowest rating considered must be used for scoring purposes. Complete the student interview, then proceed with the assessment. The team as a group must respond to every item. If there is no source of data for student performance on an item, the team must design an assessment item per the directions in the TAR Administration Guide on pages 9 and 10. Review the TAR assessment to ensure that all items are completed. The TAR form has a column where the lead team member will indicate the source of documentation for the student's work performance. The sources of documentation include the student's ILP, the student working folders such as a due process folder, classroom working folder, etc., or other sources of documentation may be noted in the space provided. It may be noted as well that there is no existing documentation and an assessment item has been designed. Student performance ratings should be established by the team with a common understanding of the items, the standard the items are assessing, and the scale on how the items will be scored. It is important that all accommodations are followed for the TAR, so providing a means for the student to use his or her modality of communication to demonstrate skills is vital. This can be pointing, eye gaze boards, or any number of communication devices. The item rating scale for the TAR is a simple 3-point scale. 0 is used when the student is unable to perform the skill being assessed. 1 is used when a student is moving toward competency with a skill but needs to be prompted during performance to do so. 2 is used when a student can independently and accurately complete the skill being assessed without the need of prompting. There is further information about the rating scale in the TAR Administration Guide on page 9. Now we will look at an example of each rating. On this slide, you will see an example of a 2 rating, which is the highest rating available on the TAR. Item: the student is able to identify the central idea of a text. Observation: the student independently scored an 80% or higher on his classwork sample for the Reading Standard and Individualized Education Program or IEP monitoring. Rating: 2. Documentation: IEP monitoring folder or the student working folder. This item would be rated a 2 because the student demonstrates the skill independently at 80% or higher. On this slide, you will see an example of a 1 rating on the TAR. Item: the student is able to identify the scale of a given graph or data display. Observation: IEP data shows that the student could do this, but only with verbal prompting. Rating: 1. Documentation: student working folder. This item is rated as a 1 because the student requires prompting. On this slide, you will see an example of a 0 rating on the TAR. Item: the student understands that a sailboat is powered by the wind in order to move forward. Observation: no previous observation had been made, so the team created an assessment activity. The assessment showed a boat on a lake with the question about what makes it move. The student was given 3 answer choices. The assessment also included 2 other items related to motion. The student did not answer any items correctly, even when given prompts. Rating: 0. Documentation: student working folder. This item is rated a 0 because the student did not demonstrate the skill even with prompts. So what are the next steps? So a quick review of what we covered and what is expected of you as you move forward to administer the TAR. Number 1, you should review the TAR administration guide completely. Number 2, once you've reviewed the guide and this training, you should complete the quiz and receive your certification. Number 3, complete the administration code training, which is required before administering any state assessment. Number 4, complete the inclusion of special populations training, which is also required before administering any state assessment. Number 5, you will need to download the TAR document, which is under Teacher Tools in the OTS. Number 6, the team should complete the student interview next. And number 7, the team convenes and rates the items for the TAR. As a reminder, the TAR is open for administration from October 2nd, 2023 to May 24th, 2024. When completing the TAR document, make sure all team members are listed. All members administering the TAR must complete the training in the OTS by March 25th, 2024. There is a firm deadline of May 31st, 2024 for score entry into the student registration database. There's a link on this page for the online training system where you will access the TAR quiz to complete your certification. This concludes the TAR training. Please click the link on the previous slide to take the quiz. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at 502-564-4394 or at krista.mullins@education.ky.gov. Thank you for your...
That was very fast. Yes, and those are about the standards that you're going to be talking about.
Okay, so the targets is what we're talking about here. And what she has, what we were talking about earlier is if you've got a student in grade 3, these are the reading standards that you'll be looking at for grade 3. And so when you go here, you'll see there's different windows. We have window 1 and 2, of course, and you'll want to look at what window will I be testing those standards in. Now, I'm going to say when we look at this for like window 1, this standard here may have, you will need to use this as a support to your regular standards because there's going to be some things that you're going to have to go back and look at in the true KYStandards.org that may not be here. And this is just a glimpse, as you can see, because if you're looking here and it says ask and answer, it says ask and answer questions and make and support logical inferences to construct meaning for the text. There are more information back in our standards that relate to this so that you can get a better understanding about what that standard is really asking you to do. Okay, so remember, this is to be used with our standards. As you can see, as we go down through here, this part of window 2, there's this multidimensionality part to it that talks about analyzing context, and Chastity can talk to you more about the reading, but I'm going to go back and talk to you a little bit about the math, of course. So there's the writing. Of course, writing is 5th, 8th, and 11th, and the math is 3rd through 10th, of course, skipping 9th, making sure, and then, of course, social studies is 5th, 8th, and 11th, and science is 4th, 7th, and 11th grade. But if you go back to the math, and I can make a good comparison here for you guys so that you can see the difference in what they have for alternate assessment and what that same standard would look like for you if you go back and look at ours. There is this coherence model down here. That's in your standards too. So when you go to this is on letting me click on it. You can actually see what they needed prior to be able to see this. So let me quickly go to kystandards.org so you can see this. Of course, when you go here, you can click up here or you can click down here and explore your standards. This is your standard resources, which has different things in it. Mathematics is always in the center right there. If you go here, these are linked. That's what I love about this. These are linked. So if I'm going to 4th grade, of course, we're going to number and operations base 10 because that's the one that it was. You'll just need to go down through here. The first ones are always operations, but we're going to go to this one right here, recognizing multi-digit numbers a digit in one place represents 10 times the digit to the place in the right. Now, and it gives you this clarification. But if a student is having trouble, what this shows you in this coherence is that you can bounce back to second grade, and that may be something that student needs to be able to move on. So you can actually just click on second grade there. It takes it right to the top one, and it shows you some things that you can use, right? So these are some things that we could possibly use. I'm going to go back to fourth grade. I want to click back on here and come to fourth grade. If we look at this fourth grade one, you see that it says here that we are going to practice math practice 7, and practice 7 says look for and make use of structure, because we're making use of the structure of place value in this case, right? And so go down through here and it's going to say, what do I need to do possibly to help my student to understand this? And so from here to here is math practice 7. And it talks about what you may want to be doing and what they need to pay attention to in the place values, and understanding that the digit is a divisible by 10, is divided by tens, and that it's multiplied by tens as they get larger, right? So for example, in solving 35 times 10, the student might think of place value as 30 and 5, and then they're going to break that down, and what does that look like? And so they'll do that they'll have 30 tens, and that equals to, if I'm timesing it by 10, 300, right? And so they can start to see what that would look like for them, giving them that chance. So this part here is very important for our students to be able to have. And again, this happens in literacy where you can bounce back between the two. Science also, there's some great stuff in the science standards that you need to look through to find. So that's important for us to be able to have. All right, Miss Brenda, that's our part of the alternate assessment and those.
This is a resource guide for the attainment task. And it said revised standards or whatever, but this is actually a resource guide. So I don't know how that got confused, but that's how KDE's linked it to us on this part. But as you go through here, and then it's also on the piece that Stephanie did just a minute ago, and it had it broke down into the content areas. So there's resources for your math, your science, your social studies, your ELA, different things. So when you look at those, you can see these pictures. And this is how some of our students work. These are some of the pieces. You can copy those, cut them out, however you want to do. And you can use those with your students. And I would even suggest that if you plan on doing these signs here, that they understand those. So you will have to teach them what they are, because some of them are like the plus sign. We do know that means add or more, or increase or something of that nature. But when you look at some of the, like all of the above, that could be confusing. Even for a regular education student, that could be confusing. So you might want to go through there, the ones that you're specifically going to use, to make sure that they understand those signs.
I was just thinking, if I was doing math, I would go through and pull a bunch of the math things out, and I would put them all on one page so the student could just point to them. That might be a good way to have those. Of course, if I was doing some questioning and I wanted them to do maybe some things, then like in conclusion and those kind of things, they may need those on a sheet. So you may want to think about, how can I pull certain ones of these and actually copy and put them on to a special sheet. And then here's the English, language arts. And then I'm going to scoot on down to, and of course, the English and language arts may also have some things that we would want to, like source. This is in social studies. We always look at the sources. So that may be something you want to pull from there. And then here's math. And then let's look at the science. Oh, they have a periodic table.
Yes.
So some great things, like I said, it's here for social studies too. I'm just going to pull a couple of these, but if you've got a student who's nonverbal or a student who just needs those images, I would definitely suggest using this. Miss Brenda, I'm going to bring up the Kentucky Dose site because we know that's a very important place for us to go. So if you've not been on the Kentucky Dose site, make sure that you look there because we also have some of those training requirements here. As you can see, there are different ones that are here that you can look at the modules and everything, and it takes you right to those pieces. So look there when you're going through. This is one of the places that you can have to look at.
This website, it has everything that you really need to know. It even has a calendar on there when things are going to be open, when things are going to close. Those types of things are on there as well. So it does have a lot of information on there. And if you are new, then I would suggest you take it and chunk it, a strategy, just chunk it and do a few at a time. And right here is where we can look at those math and reading, writing, social studies, and science. They are the same as what we looked at earlier as well. So we can, you know, it's in two different spots, but this one has everything.
This one goes into a little bit more detail. So we these by not just by the grade level that you're going to be seeing them by, but how you can see them in a progression on what your child's going to need the next year. And so if you go into these, you will see we made them look just like your standards. So we worked on these as task groups and we looked at what do you need and how does that look like. The cool thing about this one is it talks about what it looks like for your math practices, but we went on down to talk about what are some possible difficulties and misconceptions you're going to have. We talked about some visual tools that you may want to use or some tools in general that you may want to use with your students. And then other things that you might want to consider when you're teaching this. So this gives you a few other options for that. Prerequisite skill your student's going to need. Those are there. And the other big thing is, because I know if you're not really comfortable, some people aren't with teaching math, what's that vocabulary I'm going to need to make sure I'm using every day with my students so that they're comfortable. And so that's always on there, those key vocabulary. And then how am I going to engage my students with some questioning? We've got that questioning stems. They're connected into each one of these. So you can go back and look at the questioning stems for that.
If you notice down here where it says, it talks about the standard, and in red, it says alternate assessment target, and it's got limit to parentheses only. So, you know, when we see that, then that's what that means. It means limit to parentheses only. So several of those will have those. You will see those. Some of them don't, but most, you know, there's quite a few of them that do. Yeah,
in this case, that will only have parentheses in the order of operations. We will not have the brackets. We won't have all that other that they may have to do. So it'll only have the parentheses in this. So you won't have parentheses and brackets and all of that may come along with some of the questions. So you need to back it up a little bit and only include problems that have parentheses. And if you notice on this one, it says negative numbers within 100. So negative 100, positive 100 within that grouping it should be. So we shouldn't be going outside that. The problems can include mental computation and estimation, which is rounding. At that point, they may look at those. I always start when I'm teaching anything with integers within 10, move out to 20, then move out to 50, and then move out to 100. So that the students get that understanding. But I really focus within 10 for a while because we can use things like an integer bead string. We can use unifix cubes that they can build very quickly with before we move on out and they have that good understanding. So if you're working with a 7th grader at this point and you're working on those positive and negative numbers and what does that look like, you may want to think about that kind of thing. And also there's a game that they can play where they have to do certain chores. And if they don't do those chores, they have to pay you. And so that becomes a negative number for them. And so look at different kind of activities that they can do. So if you work this many days or you're supposed to do this many chores, and let's say that certain chores get you certain dollar amounts. And so if that child's not doing that chore, like they choose that they're not taking the garbage out and that's $2, then they owe $2 to you for not doing their chore. And so they have to think about, okay, which ones did I do? Which ones did I not do? And then they have to figure out if it's negative or positive at that point. So it's a good way for them to understand that. Additional resources that you're going to find on here are some of these. Alternate assessment training requirements are here. Additional language arts resources are here. So you can go on and you can find additional language arts resources that you may want to look at. Adaptive book resources that are there. So that's our KY dose. Like I said, this is the alternate assessment. There's more. Miss Brenda talked about. There's all kinds of things about ARC chairperson. There's all kinds of forms on here. We've got least restrictive environment and what does that look like? So this site is overwhelming. But just take small chunks of it. And there's online modules that you can go and do too.
And be sure that you have your 5 modules completed in your assessment, and run off your certificate. The more you get into this, the more you will understand it. Like I said before, you're going to have to take it at chunks because if you try to learn all this all at once, you won't be able to. I'm just going to tell you if you're new. So just take it as chunks, take as you can get that, and go through that at your own pace. But remember, we do have to have these things done, especially those modules that have to be done. And also your TAR and your quiz needs to be taken before you even try to do the attainment record. Those things are a must. So prioritize what you need to do with these low incidence students, because it is overwhelming, as Stephanie said, and there's so much to it. But it does help our students in the low incidence category to be on a playing field with with all the resources and all those things that we have available to use, to those clarifications. There are so many things there now that we didn't have in the past. You all may be too young, but I remember having to do those, and they would be like this big when you got done, and it was like the teacher had to do those things. It wasn't the students, it was a teacher mainly having to do those things. So now we've got people in there like Stephanie with the math that has gone in through those and has looked at those standards, targets, the clarifications, the tools that's needed, all those things that a student needs, in order to take this TAR. Because remember, it's just a checklist and of different activities. So we need to make sure that we get those activities out there and different types and get them to learn these types of things, because these types of children, they have low cognitive abilities. Therefore, it's going to take them a long time to learn it. So there's going to be a whole lot of repetition going on with this. So that's what I want to say to you, is just don't get discouraged and just do things through chunking.
And if you're needing some assistance with a certain target, feel free to reach out for Chastity or I if it's math or literacy. Math if it's me, literacy if it's Chastity. Don't call me about those. And please feel free to ask. Kim Sturgeon does a lot of stuff for us. And so please talk to her. She does a great job with social studies and knows those social studies standards really well. So contact one of us if you're having some difficulty with a specific standard. There may be a different way you're not thinking about it to be able to show it to your students. Like I said, negative numbers, I use a bead string, and I've used a balance beam, and I've tried about everything with negative numbers because it's one of the harder things for our kids to understand, that and decimals. So finding a way to get it across to them sometimes, and even equations. I've used a bead string for equations. I've used Unifix cubes. We've used counters. There's different ways to be able to get a student to see it. And with our students, we always don't know exactly what they're processing or how they're processing it. So sometimes we just need a different way.
But we know we need some type of manipulatives, because they have to be able to see it. They have to be able to count it. They have to have all these extra supports.
We greatly appreciate you guys being here, and thank you.
Thank you.